Phillip Dine joins us, author of The State of the Unions, How Labor Can Strengthen the Middle Class, Improve Our Economy, and Regain Political Influence. And on the other side, in Atlanta, Sonya Madison joins us, a labor and employment attorney located in Atlanta, Georgia. Thank you very much for both of you. Phillip, let me start with you. You don't represent the unions, but you're on the side of the unions. The unions had an offer from Boeing to basically keep the jobs in Seattle for their new plant for the 777X. Thousands and thousands of new jobs would have stayed there. The state gave $10 billion in tax credits or tax incentives for them to stay. The vote went to the unions. The unions said no. Why?
Well, I think they can get a better deal. I don't think they want to see an end to their pension plan, for example, especially when Boeing is a highly profitable company. It's among the leading exporters we have in this country, and I think the workers think that they contribute to that and should be rewarded.
Sonya, let me get you involved in here. I went through the deal. They include bonuses of $5,000 to $10,000, modest changes in their pension plans, especially for new employees that join the company. If a company can't change the pre-existing conditions that exist for existing union workers, what flexibility does a company have, and what do you advise these companies to do when they're stuck in this situation where Boeing wants to stay in Seattle, but they need the unions to say yes?
Well, and that's the one thing about the National Labor Relations Act, is that it does encourage negotiations. But here you have two different organizations that have two different interests. You have the unions that are really trying to get everything conceded by Boeing, and Boeing who's trying to get them to understand that they're trying to make revenue, they're trying to get profits, they got to make new airplanes, so they can't give all these concessions that the union wants. So one thing Boeing can do is they work with the states and they continue to compete to see which state can continue to allow them to make the revenue that they want, as well as give them the unions and the labor that they need to make the new airplanes and all the other equipment that they're seeking.
So with that, now Boeing has said after the no vote, we're going to open it up to any state who wants to bid on this new big factory of the 777X. 22 states have said yes. They're going to give rail lines, build roads, they're going to build bridges, they're going to build buildings, they're going to give away land. They want the jobs in their state, but the irony is in Washington State, the unions are still saying no. What would it take for the unions to say yes?
Well, look, I got to reject what was just said, that the unions are seeking every last concession. It's the company that's trying to upset the status quo. It's the company that's trying to take away things that now exist. I don't think the workers are demanding anything. And as far as sure, I mean, come on, these are two adult participants. The company's going to do what it can do. It's going to act like it can go elsewhere, and it can, but it would rather stay there. And the union is worried about the future. Sure, these workers would get a pretty good deal, but what about the future if they give away the pensions, for example? What about future workers?
Let me
well, and if you're talking about the future, I mean, the future is keeping the workers there and keeping the actual jobs there. And if they're not concerned about the location of the jobs and they're not realizing that other states are able to compete with them, then they're not looking at the big picture. And that's the problem a lot of times when it comes to unions. They're seeking the right now, the present benefits, but not realizing that companies do have a negotiating power when it comes to where they want to put their plants.
Let me broaden this topic out a little bit outside of just Boeing, because union membership has dropped in the United States significantly. The role of unions, you wrote a book on this, The State of the Unions, and has it changed over the last couple of decades in your mind?
The role of unions?
What is the role of unions?
The role of unions is what it always has been, twofold. First, to give workers a voice in the workplace, so they're not totally dependent upon the benevolence of their employer. They have an actual formal voice, they have a grievance process, and so on. So it's not just random. Second thing is to fight for better working conditions, and that's not just more money, it's safety and things like that. All the improvements we've seen in the work environment didn't come down from heaven. They were fought for and won by unions.
Okay. I'm going to play devil's advocate for just a little bit. Sonya, I don't hear Phillip saying that it either keeps jobs or creates jobs. Should that be a part of what unions do?
Unions, first of all, to answer your first question, I think the state of the unions has changed drastically. Initially, it was about the workers, and it was about making sure minimum wages were there, making sure workplace conditions were taken care of. But now it's moved on to being this political power that's trying to get a little bit more lobbying done instead of looking a little bit more at the workers. And then as you go on to your second question, I do think that when it comes to making sure that the jobs are there, When you look at Boeing as an example, their first priority wasn't making sure the jobs there. The first priority was making sure all these conditions were met, and they were forgetting that fact that companies like Boeing can move their jobs.
So with that said, guys, if they don't come to an agreement, and this goes to, for every single company out there negotiating with unions for long-term agreements, this one's with the Machinist Union in Seattle, the company has a right to move those jobs elsewhere, do they not?
Look, it's absurd to say that unions do not take into account whether their jobs are going to exist. You look at any negotiations taking place in this country for decades, it's always a give and take. They're always cognizant of the big picture. And secondly, it's not correct to say now they're into politics. Unions have always had a focus on legislation that relates to work and politics. That is nothing new.
Sonya, the President Obama courted the union workers in his first and second term elections. I mean, I have to say, the vote of the union, while it's weakened over the past few decades, still remains a very big deal, does it not?
And that goes back to why they become a little bit more of a lobbyist political power than they were back in the 1930s, when it became a little bit more of a new thing and an issue. And President Obama has made a point to court unions, but when you look at a lot of his initiatives, he's not fighting for a lot of the union legislations to get taken care of. He's fighting to keep the National Labor Relations Board to act on his behalf. But when it comes to legislation going through Congress, union incentives are not his first priority.
All right, very quickly, Philip, I'm going to give you the last word on it. I mean, fascinating discussion. If I'm a company from overseas, I'm looking to set up shop here in the United States, a manufacturing plant, I see all this arguing and bickering back and forth. What do you tell them?
Two things. First, I think Sonya is exactly right in what she just said. I think that unions are disappointed in President Obama's lack of leadership on workplace issues. Secondly, what you tell them, to answer your question, is this happens everywhere in the world. It's way worse in most European countries. There's nothing unusual about labor management friction.
I wish I could get my producer involved. She worked in France, and she has a lot to say. Phillip, Dine, Sonya Madison, to both of you, thank you very much for joining us on this topic.